Hello, we'll talk now about Ricardo Bofill, an important Catalan architect who unfortunately at one moment moved to Paris with his office, and that was not a good move in my opinion. So let's read a little bit about him. Ricardo Bofill Levy, born on December 5th, and that's the reason we talk about him today, was a Spanish architect from Barcelona, Spain. Well, a Catalan architect. He founded Ricardo Bofill Taller de Arquitectura in 1963 and developed it into a leading international architectural and urban design practice. According to architectural historian Andrew Ayers, his creations rank, I quote, among the most impressive buildings of the 20th century. Well, an exalted statement. Born in the late 1939, just after the end of the Spanish Civil War, Ricardo Bofill grew up in a well-to-do family with deep Catalan and Barcelonese roots. His grandfather had been involved in prominent local institutions such as the Institute for Catalan Studies, the Catalan Institute of Natural History, and the Royal Academy of Sciences and Arts of Barcelona. His father, Emilio Bofill, was an architect, builder, and developer who studied at the Escola Técnica Superior de Arquitectura de Barcelona, Catalonia's oldest professional architecture school. Ricardo Bofill would later describe him as Republican, liberal, progressive, austere, and logical. I mean, it's almost like a criticism. Ricardo's mother, on the other hand, Maria Levi, or Levi Levi, was an Italian of Jewish descent born in Venice, who became a prominent sponsor of Catalan literature and culture in post-war Barcelona. But Ricardo Bofill was a rebellious student. He studied at the Lycée Français de Barcelona. He spent much of his youth traveling, first with his family and later on his own, and developed a passion for vernacular architecture. Unfortunately, he kind of forgot that passion when he moved to Paris. His first project was a summer home in Ibiza, completed in 1960. That year, he enrolled at the Escola Técnica Superior de Arquitectura de Barcelona, where he engaged in student activism with the unauthorized Unified Socialist Party of Catalonia. Beautiful, and I truly suggest to architecture students to become activists. Fight for what you believe in, including in politics. In 1958, he was arrested in a demonstration and expelled from the university and from Spain. Can you imagine? He was he took this risk, and he was expelled not just from the university but from Spain as well. He moved to Switzerland and completed his formal architectural training at the Haute École d'Art et de Design in Genève. In 1963, Ricardo Bofill and a group of close friends created Ricardo Bofill Taller de Arquitectura, his architecture workshop, initially hosted in his father's construction business with offices on Plaza de Catalunya in the center Barcelona. Building on Catalan traditions of craftsmanship, he enlisted architects and engineers, but also writers and artists into a multidisciplinary effort, which later branched into urban design and urban planning. Beautiful. The team experimented on original methodologies based on three-dimensional modular geometry, such as those of the Gaudi district, El Castillo de Kafka in Samper. We'll see that this building, Xanadu, La Muralla Roja in anyway. The same thinking was developed on a larger scale with the project La Ciudad en el Espacio, the city in space, whose construction started in the Moratalaz area of Madrid in 1970, but was abruptly stopped by Francoist Mayor Carlos Arias Navarro. As you can see, frictions between the creativity of Ricardo Bofill and his group of friends and collaborators and the political powers. It was instead realized with the construction of Walden 7, a beautiful housing complex in San Just near Barcelona, 1970-1975. These projects were recognized as exemplars of critical regionalism and can be viewed as a reaction against both architectural modernism and the Francoist dictatorship in Spain. This was the man, Ricardo Bofill, and a seductive man. And yes, he was lucky to grow up in a affluent family. Here he is as a young, cocky man, an architect who, let's not forget, was also an activist and who risked and who was even expelled not just from the university but also from the country itself, from Spain. And ladies and gentlemen, this was the architecture office of Ricardo Bofill and Taller de Arquitectura near Barcelona. What could be more beautiful? Unfortunately, they moved to France after they achieved international recognition. But look at the interior. I mean, they transformed, a factory into their headquarters. Theatrical, dramatic, large spaces, spaces for dreaming, spaces for wanting to change the world. And I think we need this spirit again. Iconoclasm, non-conformism. Well, there is also opulence here. Yes, he came from a well-to-do family, but there is also vision. And this vision was apparent, is obvious in the works they did at that time. I mean, can you imagine working in such an architecture office? You can only do very interesting works. In fact, Walden 7 is not far away from it, and it's magnificent. Even Thomas Heatherwick included this complex of buildings on his list of human or humanistic architectures today. But the office of Taller de Arquitectura and Ricardo Bofill at that time was in this transformed factory at the edge of Barcelona. The interior very comfortable, of course. The stair with just one parapet, one handrail, like in the case of Le Corbusier very often. Artworks, books, large spaces, not afraid of roughness. Um, and surrealism, which informed that architecture at that time, was actually to be perceived also in this architecture of their own office. Look at this. Again, if you work in such an architecture office, in my opinion, you cannot do banal work because the context in which you live and work is not banal. And what else do we see here? The historical presence or the historic present that Lina Bobardi talked about, no? Because the past is present through the existing structure that was left unembellished. It's theatrical, no? Well, it's Catalonia, it's Spain, it's close to the Mediterranean Sea. It's the light and the warmth of the climate. Has something to say also about what you do, what you create. Now, we think of Picasso, we think of Dali. Why they came from there? Why did they come from there? Well, maybe it's not such a great mystery. Anyway, moving forward. So, what a splendid architecture office. I can only be envious. I wish I had this chance. I was born later, but I wish I lived at that time to collaborate in such a. This is the most magnificent architecture office that I know of. It's dramatic, it's theatrical, it's hybrid, it has many parts, it has informality, it has everything. It's the palace of creativity. And look at this hole here, left like this, you know, like in the Bomarzo Park. It eats up you, the building eats you up. And it's even, suggestive of green architecture. It's beautiful. The most beautiful architecture office in the world was this one. While they left for Paris, it was a sad thing when they did so. And you'll see the difference in the architecture they did. Here it was everything. They should not have left. It was a mistake. It happens. Sometimes we make wrong decisions. And success the tongues of flame of the flames of fame and the tongues of fame, not flame, the tongues of fame, seduce you and lick you, and then you succumb and you leave such glorious headquarters. Look at that table. I think Vladimir Putin would have loved it too, but of course not with so many chairs. Just on the narrow side, one chair, and on the other narrow side, another one. And with such a table, you would avoid being infected by different ideologies or COVID. Drawings, easels, large spaces. Yes, let's go for it. Let's not think in banal terms. Let's be courageous. Let's transform the world. Well, it was for this was a space for high-end enterprises and for kings and queens. Yeah, that's how the building was before it was transformed into the offices of Taller de Arquitectura and Ricardo Bofill at the edge of just outside of Barcelona. I mean, these containers, these vessels, or I don't know how to call them, they are almost channels of communicating with God from the conference table and from, yes, it's the vertical connection with the above. What a chance for these friends of Ricardo Bofill to live and work, to work. I don't know if they live there, but to work in such an environment, multidisciplinary team. And at that time, they declared, I don't know if Ricardo Bofill said it or they said it together, they said this was a statement of Thaler de Arquitectura. For us, Magritte is more important than Miss van der Rohe. Well, Magritte was a surrealist painter, and Miss van der Rohe would know who he was. So surrealism was more important for Thaler de Arquitectura and Ricardo Bofill than the great master of prismatic architecture, simplicity, Miss van der Rohe. But I think even Miss van der Rohe would have been envious of this, architectural ambiance in which Thaler de Arquitectura worked. Great. What else can I say? They wanted to change the world. This must be said again and again. An architect does not deserve the name an architect unless he or she wants to change the world, even if he or she does know that it's not easy to change the world. But you have to have the desire to change the world. And they had this desire. And this building, the way they transformed it, shows it. Is the most fabulous, again, I repeat, I sorry for repeating myself, is the most fabulous architecture office maybe ever in the world. And here you see in the back, on the left side, the housing complex they built, the Walden 7, which is again on the list of human or humanistic buildings or humanist buildings, the list of Thomas Heatherwick, which was just published. But before we arrive at Walden 7, let's look at this work. Niaragua 99 apartments, T is missing there, sorry. An excellent building within the city, excellent because it is a modern architecture, but there is also a concern for is not using white walls and shining surfaces. There is tactility, there is texture to the walls, and there is also the organic material, the brick, meaning earth. Now the Bach apartments, here we also see the woven wall, the textured wall. So they did great architecture at that time within the city and outside of the city. Ricardo Bofill and his Talent de Arquitectura. Not bad. Also, it's turning its back, this architecture, to the glass wall, the all-encompassing glass wall. So the wall, the masonry wall, shows up again. The brick, which is warm and so appropriate, for a city like Barcelona. And now we arrive at this supreme achievement of this architecture firm, Talent de Arquitectura and Ricardo Bofill. Look at this. Who would build such apartment buildings even today? Nobody. Nobody, not even the Arabs and not even the Chinese. Although they have all the money in the world and they are open to experiments. But what they don't have is the social concern coupled with an exuberant creativity that this team of architects, and not just architects, we read, multidisciplinary team, had this enthusiasm, exuberance, this desire to change the world. Otherwise, you cannot build these buildings, and these are not expensive. I mean, there are not expensive apartments here. They are very small, but very small. This is probably social housing. But can you imagine? It's a dramatic architecture dedicated to unprivileged people, showing that it's possible to do architecture for those who might not know enough about architecture. They were not connoisseurs. They didn't need to be connoisseurs. If you live in this building, you know that you have an identity. You are not just a number. You are not just an anonymous being of the big city. You are a human being with dignity, and the building is encouraging you to think in almost heroic terms. Look at that void. Yesterday we talked about John Portman and his voids in his hotels. But these morally and even aesthetically are superior to the buildings by John Portman, because this is not about entertainment. This is not a hotel. This is housing. And that void at the core of the building is what brings people together. You are going to see pictures. Well, the resolution here is not great, a little better. Can you imagine when you exit your apartment, you are seeing the very core of the absence of architecture that is the major part, is the important part of the whole building. You communicate. In essence, this building is about transcending the individual and recognizing that we are all together. This is not happening in banal apartment buildings where you exit your apartment and you have an enclosed staircase and you just fly on the stair, or you take the elevator and then you are extirpated into the street. Here, this space, which apparently does not have a function, as the functionalist might say, exactly this space is reclaiming the collective identity of the people who live here. That is the most fabulous, no? I mean, try to compare, but you can't. But try to compare this with a typical block of flats. You can't. Here there is even mystery, no? There is curiosity. You realize that okay, you have your own window, you have your own little apartment, but you belong to a whole. Res privata becomes res publica. You can take countless pictures here that are extremely interesting. It's also the relationship between the apartment and the exterior circulations, you know, the corridors, the small balconies. So there is this interplay between the inside and the outside, which is continuous. And then the chromatics, of course. It's a fabulous architecture. And again, this is not built for the rich, this is built for the poor. They live like heroes here. I would love to have this little room here, or here, or here, or here. Yes, an oniric architecture. This is, I don't know if it's in Catalan or maybe in Spanish. It's an oniric architecture, a dreamlike architecture. Those are probably students in architecture coming to visit the building, you know, because they can learn about different ways of doing architecture. You know, apartment buildings, why do they have to be banal? They don't. So I guess they learned a lot from Magritte, and they turned their back on this, and they did well. Here they are, you know, photographing the model of some model, you know, not far away from their office, and then Walden 7. Look at this. Look also at the emergence or re-emergence of the labyrinth. Yes, the labyrinth, which is a scandal for the intelligence, especially of the so-called rational, logical man, as he described his own father was. Now, compare this with your own experience when you exit your apartment and you are in the no man's land of a banal little you know, space in front of the stair, and there is nothing to contemplate, there is nothing to stir up your interest, your visual interest, your imagination. While here, Walden 7 and windows towards the city, and maybe even the past, and maybe even the future. An eventful architecture, is it not? Yes. Palaces for the poor. What could be better? Although sometimes we shouldn't idealize the poor either, because we remember the movie Viridiana, no, where Buñuel became rather skeptical about the angelic attributes of the underprivileged ones or the poor. Anyway, surrealism is important and could be important for architecture again, and I think we need surrealism. I am personally tired of so-called realism, you know, realism, which kills life itself, reality itself. Reality itself is more than just what we call reality. It includes fantasy. It includes the world of dreams, true reality. The fake reality excludes, banishes dream, banishes imagination, banishes what we call the unconscious. But true reality doesn't banish them, it embraces them. And that's what they did here through this building. And not only this building, we are going to see a few others. Bravo to them. But look at the apartments. I don't know if you can read them. Sorry. They are very small. But they are very small, but they are together. Even if I don't know how to say it, it's okay because even if your own unit is small, actually you belong to the whole building, and the whole building or the whole buildings belong to you because you are part of a larger group. So essentially, the limits of your own apartment are beyond the physical limits of your own apartment. It's magical. It's magical. You feel less alone in such a building. You cannot be alone. You cannot feel alone. While in most apartment buildings, you feel dead. You feel completely alone. You are even afraid to die because of your solitude. But here, because of this kind of architecture, uh, which involves collectively the creativity of a larger group, I don't think solitude is felt as intensely as in most apartment buildings or I don't know, modern housing complexes and so on. That's what I meant when I said that Thaler de Arquitectura wanted to change the world. Was this it was true. It was also the time, the end of the 60s, the beginning of the 70s, when the young ones especially fought against the Vietnam War, fought against banks. Well, it's true. he was a rich man, I mean, coming from a rich family, Ricardo Bofill. But he had the left leanings. He had the pathos of a reformer, of a social reformer. What section through apartment buildings built today looks like this? And again, what is important here is the absence of architecture. I mean, it is the architecture plus the absence of architecture, and they together create that architecture with a capital A or with a capital all letters. And it's a great section, this one. Let's confess it. Now, of course, if today we would build such a building, we would have many more floors with cars. At that time, there were fewer cars and smaller cars. But above this, parking grows the flower of architecture, the building. And look at the apartments, the housing units. And look particularly at the section where the floor is not flat, where the floor becomes also sitting or even table. And you see the ceiling is very low. These are very economical housing units, but they work. You look at these two balconies here, most unusual. They're almost in plan as like the representation of two larger doors, no? I mean, you look at this door here and you look at these two balconies here. And it's kind of funny now that you have two balconies that are individualized as two being two, and they almost I mean, you wonder why was it necessary. Functionalist, banal architect would have made just one single balcony here. Well, they made two, and also with this curvature. So you can, let's say, husband and the wife, this is the balcony of the husband, this is the balcony of the wife, and they can have a chat, from their private little balconies over the limits of their private balconies. Small things, there are doors that these balconies are doors that open towards the outside. Very interesting work. And this is just one unit, And it doesn't need the furniture here too much because the furniture is built in, not just in the walls, but also in the floor. Okay, you could say that maybe the height is not sufficient. I mean, you see here, it's almost I mean, less than 2 meters. It's not tall, but I maybe this variety in the floor creates some kind of a I don't know, a positive feeling, perhaps, and I hope some drawings which are maybe were inspired to an extent by Le Corbusier, but they show, of course, the configuration of what they designed. Look at this plan here. This is a duplex. I see it has another floor. Um, yeah, very small. I mean, maybe you can see. My glasses do not allow me to see what is the actual dimension of this square. It is as if these houses are not ends in themselves. They are more like pauses in the urban life. You come home, but you do not come home to remain there. You come home only for a while, a short while or a longer while, and then it seems the center of attention is actually outside of the home. The home is just it is as if the architects try to say, okay, you have your own individual life, your own existence, but the larger goal here is the life of the collective, is the public life, is what is outside of your little cell, your little unit. And this is what the architecture, look at this triumphal, in the good sense of the word, entrance into the building. I mean, even palaces of great noblemen and very rich men cannot have something like this, because here is about a large number of people sharing architectural qualities that in the history of architecture belonged mainly to the very few. This is not an architecture of the 1%. This is the architecture of the 99%. Now, Kafka's castle in Barcelona, near Barcelona, also by Talent de Arquitectura and Ricardo Bofill. Okay, the Roy experiments done at the Montreal Expo by Moshe Sabdi. This has some similarities, but it's also different because this one, I mean, even its name, Kafka's Castle, these are informed works by literature, by, existential concerns that serialist, not surrealist, but serialist from serious architecture do not usually have. And we see movement here too, this turbine, this turbifying architecture, if I am to call it so. Interesting work, Kafka's castle. Wouldn't you rather live in such a, apartment building than the common ones? Oh yes, yes. It's special, no? It makes you special. Instead of the sameness of we know what. I mean, yes, there is geometry here. Yes, there is logic. Look, you have the apartments. The circulation is from the four sides of a stair at different levels, and it's very logical. No, there are no lost spaces here. And yes, even if the apartment is not big, um, I think the originality of the architectural conception is making you feel richer and with a bigger space than the one you actually have. It's a fabulous architecture. That's what it is. And it's fabulous because they had a vision and because, again, they had the desire to change the world, so to speak, change the world. All the interiors are made in a minimalist style. The color of the facade chosen from a variety of shades of blue. And again, we see the insinuation of the ornament, even at the level of the site plan. There are rotations. It's a clear ornamental design here at work. Yes, it is a system, but it's a system which allows them to also obtain a lot of variation and complexity, vast complexity. An utopian dream stood still. Ricardo Bofill's postmodern Parisian housing estate at Noisy-le-Grand. Unfortunately, they had so much success that they moved to France, wanted to change France itself, and unfortunately, in France, they became influenced by the emperor, so to speak, by the centrality of urban planning in Paris, where the boulevards converged towards l'Arc de Triomphe. Something of the empire or imperialist mentality entered the creative universe, and that's what we got. This particular housing complex is a transition between what they did in Barcelona and what they were to do in Paris. This one still has some vigor because it's not affected by historicism. But what they did, look here. Here, yes, it is in a way impressive, but in my opinion, is impressive not in positive terms, but in negative terms. Because we see the opposite of a democratic architecture. We see an architecture of dogma, of centrality, of rhetorics, and yes, at the first sight, they might seem impressive, but the truth of the matter is here, because of the historicism that entered their work, the illusion of being, a reformer in life, the inhabitant of one of these apartments, became the delusion of having, empire. I don't know how to say it now. I'm a little bit tired, but what I want to say is that the inhabitants of these apartments here are not, high-end officers of Legion d'Honneur or, working for the ministry of I don't know what, but common people, common people with common jobs. And the apartment is giving you the illusion that you are something bigger than actually you are, but it's an inflation. It's an inflated feeling. And in my opinion, this is a demagogical architecture. In a certain way, it's the very opposite of what they did near Barcelona. In Barcelona, it was a different spirit. Here is, the weight of historicism, this mega architecture, which tries to convey the feeling that we are all kings, when in fact we are not. You could be a janitor somewhere and you live in this palace-like, French mega structure. It's rhetoric, it's demagogy. I'm sorry, Ricardo Bofill, it's your birthday today, but in my opinion, despite, of course, some, expensive architectural acrobatics here, uh, in essence, I feel it's a false architecture. Or here, okay, who is living here? God himself, Zeus. And what about all the other windows? What is the meaning of this monolithic mega circle? There is formalism here. In Barcelona, was something different. Yes, there were big investments here. You'd say, it was a great collective experiment, in my opinion, a failed experiment, and failed because it was affected by historicism, by centrality, by a static symmetry, and it's a different architecture. I'm sad. I am sad because here I feel the willfulness of the structure. There isn't playfulness any longer. Here is about control. Is about the rigidity of dogma. The drawings are still nice. Whoever did these drawings in their office. But look here, it's no, it's not open. It's what are all those columns? That multitude of columns. Why do we need so many columns? I mean, columns are associated with power, no, with authority, even when made of glass, like here. Yes, it is still an interesting architecture because it is unique, but this picture I like because here, I see reflections and irregularities, so betrayals of control. But the buildings, but we look here, this is ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, this is ridiculous, although there is some kind of a repetition of those two so-called doors, of those two balconies in the Walden 7 complex of buildings. But the connection, this is not a connection. If the adoration of the joint, to use the words, that were to describe Carlos Carpa's love for the joint. Here, there is no adoration of the joint. There is no love. This is an artificial, so-called bringing together. It's ridiculous, in my opinion. I'm very surprised that Ricardo Bofill and Tale de Arquitectura did something so unconvincing. But even the structure is unconvincing. It's very possible that Ceausescu would have loved this architecture. After all, what he did with the Casa Poporului, the House of the Republic, or of the people, and the boulevard, and go straight into it, is not very different in spirit from what Ricardo Bofill and Thaler de Arquitectura did in Paris, surprisingly. I don't know what this is here, but I do see here, some protesting people and some defending the authority. It's a rhetorical architecture, rhetorical in the bad sense of the word. We see other examples, les Arcades du Lac et le Viaduc. Now here, yes, it is exceptional because it is on water, it is on the lake. But even here, you know, look at that a poor man, probably a retired man, staring at the palace, which is not telling the truth because the palace is not built for the king and for the queen, but for some, you know, probably, you know, blue collar workers or retired people and so on. Yes, you could say it is magnificent. No, it's glorious in its references to historical architecture in France. But I think exactly that is very problematic. It's ideologized. It's an ideologized architecture, and as such is very problematic. It wants to be sublime, but for me, more sublime is one of these banal bicycles than all these buildings built in France by Thaler de Arquitectura. Now look at this. You know, what is this? What is this? You know, how could it be that all of a sudden architects who claimed that Magritte was more important than Mies, now they seem to say that I don't know what classical or classicist architect is more important than the modern Mies. Actually, Mies is less oppressive than this architecture, built at Montigny-le-Bretonneux. That's how I perceive them today. You can still take some interesting pictures, I guess, but no, no, no. I mean, you know, these columns and other temple-like configurations, what do they tell you? You know, that some gods live here? No, you can tell from the look at these two people, you know, they if they are not unemployed, they are very close to being unemployed and worried about their bills. So what do those columns have to do with them? Nothing. Postmodernism in Paris. Postmodernism was a disaster for architecture. And Le Temple du Lac show it. You know, what temple for what gods? No, truly, they should have stayed near Barcelona. The move to France was a disaster for Ricardo Bofill and Thaler de Arquitectura. Look at the king, probably living on a minimal pension. And he is the king, together with the with the dead leaves, ruling what over the desert of human madness and another so-called temple. It's ridiculous. I mean I do not understand what happened to him, to Ricardo Bofill. Why did he move to France? Why? He should have moved to Romania and worked for Ceausescu. I'm sure Ceausescu would have loved this kind of architecture. Oh, yes. So cultured, so historical, so refined, and so dead. I have to move quicker now because I can't look at this. No, 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 and no again. No. Antigone district. Look at this. Perfect. You think you are in the center of Christianity in Rome, and you are not. Very, very strange change. He tried to turn his back on historicism later, and we are going to see a few works, but this was fatal. The move to France was fatal to Ricardo Bofill. This was built in Chicago, that skyscraper. What a shape! Chicago, which created the skyscraper, which had unbelievable architects, you know, like Louis Sullivan or Frank Lloyd Wright, and even Mies, they couldn't invent or reinvent themselves, so they imported a skyscraper from Ricardo Bofill here, near Lake Michigan. One of the more colorful figures in architectural history was the 15th century Florentine financier Giovanni Rucellai, the third richest man in Florence. He was the money behind Leon Battista Alberti's designs for the Palazzo Rucellai and the facade of Santa Maria Novella, both in Florence. But he also was behind one of my favorite maxims. This is what Ricardo Bofill said. No, somebody said, by the way, Ricardo Bofill, men have two roles. The first is to procreate, and the second is to build. And man builds to honor God and to bring glory to his city and his family. Ricardo Bofill has certainly done that. Somebody wrote this. Totally wrong. In my opinion, totally wrong. In 1976, I mean, I had the highest admiration for what they did near Barcelona and in Barcelona, but not for what they did in France. In 1976, RBTA was commissioned by the Société des Autoroutes du Sud-Est de la France to build this monument on the Catalan highway border between Spain and France. Sorry, letter C is missing, and this is the monument. Well, here, although this geometrization of nature, this transformation of nature of a mountain or a hill into some kind of a so-called natural pyramid sickens me a little bit, because I don't think nature needs our willful control. Yes, it's, that structure there, you could say, is moderately interesting, but the abuse of man vis-a-vis nature is obvious. You carve a hill or a mountain in this way. Why? To show that to show what? That you actually, on your way to Mars, you still want to leave your footprint on this earth in such an obvious and aggressive way. Yeah, maybe the monument has some, I don't know, legitimate theatricality, but not the carving of the hill in this way. I find it annoying. Now, the national, I don't know why I kept missing one letter. In this case, the T, National Theatre of Catalonia, another disaster. Another disaster, because these columns borrowed from history have nothing to do with the glass walls behind them. It's just theatrics. It's just the demagogy of form and of borrowings. But later on, he did this Polytechnic University in Morocco, which has some virtues. This is a sketch for the university. This is the site plan where I think he assimilated, approximately well the ornamental designs of Islam. And this is the building. He gave up historicism, and that's a good thing. And okay, maybe it's not the most original architecture, but at least it doesn't have any longer historical references or historicists. A little bit we see the windows, but those windows also were present at the factory where their offices were near Barcelona. Otherwise, there are moments of some purity or some plastic drama. Still, there are columns which to me shows that Ricardo Bofill, despite his left leanings when he was a student, he had some leanings towards what Salvador Dali, his countryman, would call the monarchy. Salvador Dali was fond of being simultaneously an anarchist and a monarchist. And maybe in this sense, to an extent, Ricardo Bofill was himself after moving to France. So this is in Morocco, university. Uh, ironically, but it was said that we become what we hate. Now, this is not truly a Miesian architecture, but you could see some relation with Mies van der Rohe. Not here, but here. But we know they rejected Mies at the beginning when they said, for us, Magritte is more important than Mies. Yes, there might be some truth in that saying. We become what we hate. Not that they became Miesian architects, no. But there are some, echoes a little bit of Mies that you wouldn't expect if you contemplate the other side of this architecture, like this one. Maybe also some influences, but more domesticated from Louis Kahn in Dhaka. Kahn was a greater architect than Ricardo Bofill, but if Ricardo Bofill would have remained that activist architect of his early years, he would have been judged less severely by what followed, and by what follows, and by what will follow. Anyway, campus, another university campus done with plenty of money. That's it. So let's wish him happy birthday. Happy birthday, Ricardo Bofill. And thank you for giving us the occasion to talk about your work.